To the people of Africa, to the hearts that beat for justice, and to every mother who buried her son under our sky, hear me. We do not bow. We do not beg. We do not forget. When our soldiers were attacked, they did not die in silence. They died with their boots on, their rifles raised and their names etched into the soul of this land. And those who believe they can kill our men to break our will, they do not know Burkina Faso. To those responsible, we are coming. To my people, stay strong, stay proud. We are not victims, we are the storm.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Ibrahim Traoré's era. Today we confront a truth soaked in grief, fury and defiance. A story that has cracked the silence and pierced the heart of Africa. Over 50 Burkinabè soldiers, dead, killed in a brutal surprise attack. The timing was just days after Traoré rejected a Western award backed by the United States. Was this a coincidence? The people of Burkina Faso don't think so. This isn't just another attack. It's a signal, a test, and Traoré is answering with fire. It began as just another sunrise. The soldiers at the northern base had finished their dawn prayers, some sipping morning tea, others beginning early patrols. Laughter, casual conversations, radio chatter, a calm that had become rare in these regions. Then, without warning, everything changed. A piercing whistle sliced the air. Then the first explosion. Then another. The ground trembled beneath their boots. Buildings cracked. Towers collapsed. Gunfire erupted from the tree lines and ridges surrounding the camp. Mortars, drone-fired missiles, coordinated, precise, and overwhelming. Within minutes, chaos reigned. The soldiers fought back, fiercely, but they were outgunned, outflanked, and blindsided. Their communications were jammed, reinforcements delayed. In just under an hour, the base was unrecognizable, a ruin of smoke, rubble, and silence. A graveyard for the brave. Local villagers reported the sounds of war as early as 5:17 a.m. Some said they saw strange aircraft in the sky that made no sound. Others claimed to have seen bright flashes long before hearing any explosions, signs of precision-guided weaponry. Survivors tell haunting stories. A young soldier, barely 19, crawled out from under a collapsed barracks wall to find his entire unit gone. He had only joined the army 6 months earlier. It wasn't a battle, he said, eyes hollow. It was a slaughter. The bodies of fallen heroes were found clutching their weapons, side by side. Some still had fingers on triggers. They didn't run. They didn't surrender. Commanders on the ground sent distress signals, but satellite communication was jammed within the first 5 minutes. This wasn't just an attack. It was a full-spectrum military operation designed to cripple, isolate, and destroy. The weaponry used raised more questions than answers. Traces of high-end military explosives, precision-guided munitions, and electromagnetic jammers were found at the scene. These are not tools found in the hands of local terrorist groups. These are signatures of state-level operations. The question on every Burkinabè tongue: who has the motive, the technology, and the reach to execute such a strike? In the villages nearby, families held their breath as ambulances passed, sirens wailing. Mothers fell to their knees as names of the fallen were released. Fathers clenched fists. Brothers swore oaths of vengeance. One elder, a veteran of Burkina Faso's earlier struggles, whispered into a crowd gathered outside the local mosque, "This wasn't war. This was a message, and we have received it." Local radio stations began broadcasting tributes. Names, faces, ages, dreams interrupted. Some of the dead were just days from finishing their service. One was set to be married the following week. Another had just sent money home for his mother's medication. This was not just a tactical blow. It was personal, intimate, cruel. At military hospitals, scenes of both heartbreak and heroism played out. Medics, many of them volunteers, worked around the clock. Blood donors lined up outside clinics. Retired nurses returned to service. Students skipped classes to deliver food. The entire nation turned toward its wounded. And beneath the grief, something else simmered. Rage. Not the rage of blind vengeance, but the focused fury of a people who have been pushed too far. That morning did not end at noon. It never became afternoon. The sun rose, but the day stayed dark. And in that darkness, a vow was made. The blood of those 50 soldiers will not be washed away by media silence. Their memory will not be buried under diplomatic lies. Burkina Faso remembers. Africa remembers. Because on that morning, what they tried to destroy was not just a base. They tried to kill our spirit, and they failed. Just 1 week before the deadly attack, a seemingly simple diplomatic gesture was extended to Captain Ibrahim Traoré. A group of diplomats from the United States paid a visit to Traoré at the presidential palace to invite him for an award. They said Traoré's work and the development of Burkina Faso in recent years has not gone unnoticed, and so he has been nominated for a prestigious achievement award. The award was labeled a celebration of leadership and courage in Africa. It came wrapped in praise, coated in flattery and masked as goodwill. But Traoré saw it for what it truly was, and he rejected it without hesitation. He didn't send a polite decline. He didn't issue a vague diplomatic excuse. He didn't host the delegation. He didn't pose for photos. He didn't engage in handshakes that bind and smiles that suffocate. He simply said, "Burkina Faso doesn't need Western medals. The smiles of our people are the only award I need." In a world where African leaders are often measured by how close they sit to Western power, Traoré turned his back and faced the people instead. That refusal sent shockwaves. In Washington it was seen as arrogance. In Africa it was seen as liberation. It was not just the rejection of a plaque and a podium. It was the rejection of an entire structure built to control, manipulate and absorb leaders into the machinery of neocolonialism. These awards given with one hand come with contracts, advisors, military bases and IMF strings in the other. Traoré, a student of history, knew better. He had studied the fate of Gaddafi, who shook hands with the West until he stopped giving cheap oil. Sankara, who dared to refuse debt, paid with his life. Even Mandela, embraced by the West only after decades of demonization. These moments are not coincidences, they are patterns, and by rejecting the award, Traoré broke the pattern. Across Africa, the moment went viral. Clips of the refusal flooded social media. In Ghana, Mali, Congo and Nigeria, Pan-Africanist movements hailed the act. Students in Dakar cheered it in protests. Radio hosts in Bamako analyzed its significance. It became a spark in the consciousness of young Africans, tired of watching their leaders beg for approval from those who destabilized their nations. Meanwhile, Western analysts called it a missed opportunity for engagement. They framed Traoré as reckless, as isolating Burkina Faso. But behind closed doors, those same analysts raised alarm bells. In leaked memos, defense consultants labeled Traoré a rising threat, not to peace but to control. Because when an African leader rejects the rules of the game falls apart. It was no secret the US had grown uncomfortable with the wave of anti-Western sentiment surging across the Sahel. The rise of sovereign-minded leaders in Mali, Guinea and now Burkina Faso created what some in Washington termed an uncontrollable bloc. Traoré's rejection was not just an act of personal integrity. It was geopolitical defiance. It was an African leader choosing respect over recognition, loyalty to the people over loyalty to global elites. And within few days after the rejection, the Burkina Faso military base was attacked. Was the timing coincidence? Was the attack random? The people don't believe it. Because when a lion roars in a cage, the keepers get nervous. And when the cage door is kicked open, the world scrambles. This rejection, this seemingly small gesture, was a spark, and the fire is spreading. The African continent has a long memory. We remember Patrice Lumumba, executed after standing against colonial interests. We remember Kwame Nkrumah, overthrown after calling for a united Africa. We remember Sankara, assassinated after he nationalized the land and spoke truth to imperialism. And now Traoré, a man who reads history not in books but in scars. He knows what comes with refusing Western handouts masked as honors. He knows what follows rejection. So he prepared, but even preparation doesn't lessen the pain. The ambush that took those soldiers was a surgical strike, clean, efficient, devastating. Not the work of ragtag militias, but of entities with access to satellite intelligence, airspace data, and electronic warfare. Burkinabè analysts and veteran officers are speaking up. The pattern is clear. This was military grade. The precision, unmistakable. The aftermath, calculated. Western media barely blinked. A few lines here, a footnote there. No outrage, no headlines, just silence. Why? Because this story doesn't fit the narrative. Because acknowledging the bloodshed means confronting the question, who benefits from Traoré's fall? Because if you admit this was no random act, you admit someone meant for this to happen. And the people of Burkina Faso already know who. Traoré didn't disappear into a bunker. He didn't call for talks. He went straight to the base, stood with the wounded, looked into the eyes of mourning mothers, and made a vow. We will not rest until we find out who did this. And when we do, we will retaliate, strongly, without apology. His words struck like thunder. In Ouagadougou, mothers marched. Some wept, others screamed. All demanded justice. One mother held up her son's photo and shouted, "You killed my child but not his spirit. We will never kneel." Memorials appeared across the country. Candles, boots on flags, flowers from children, songs of mourning, but also songs of war. Across the countryside, farmers and herders gathered in silence. Local militias formed. Village elders called emergency meetings. Tribal leaders pledged loyalty. A whole nation turned from mourning to readiness. This wasn't just a Burkinabè moment. This was an African moment. Across Mali, Niger, Guinea, the Congo, citizens lit candles. Pan-African groups held vigils. Diaspora communities in Europe and America flooded the internet with solidarity. One sign read, "If Traoré falls, Africa falls." Russia condemned the attack. Military advisors landed in Ouagadougou. New alliances began to form. Burkina Faso is not alone. Traoré launched the National Heroes Fund. Full support for the families of the fallen. Housing, healthcare, education. A promise that the sacrifice would never be forgotten. Villagers sent food to military camps. Children painted murals. Youth pledged to enlist. Women volunteered in barracks. Traders donated supplies. Artists donated proceeds. It was not sympathy. It was solidarity. Across regions, citizens formed patrols. Flags flew higher. Schools taught national defense history. Teachers turned lessons into mobilization. This was not just a reaction. This was a revolution. Let this be clear. If this was meant to intimidate Burkina Faso, it failed. If it was meant to silence Traoré, it only made him louder. And if it was meant to break the people, it made them unbreakable. Because now Burkina Faso stands not as a victim, but as a vanguard. And Traoré, he is not just president. He is a flame, a symbol, a call to arms. To the West, understand this. Your tools of control, awards, threats, violence, they no longer work here. This is not the Africa of yesterday. This is Ibrahim Traoré's era. If you hear this truth, carry it. If you feel this fire, share it. Africa does not kneel. Africa rises. Until next time, stand firm, speak the truth, never kneel.